name is Cassandra Conway, and I decided to make this video opposed to writing what I'm going to share because I need help and I'm running out of time. Um, I have an aunt. Her name is Jossie. Her real name is Joshlyn T.O.D. She is a victim of nursing home neglect. This story is very, very complicated, but I have all the evidence in my phone. My Aunt Jossie, she is mentally retarded, and she's been in the nursing home since 2007, the year my grandmom died. My grandma was her caretaker, and I helped my dad. We 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 we, we placed her in Fairview Nursing Home in Montgomery County on Paper Mill Road. My dad promised his mom that he would go and make sure he would look after Jossie, which he has done and will continue to do so. Jossie uh, mental retardation was not severe. There's different levels of uh, mental mental retardation, and hers was not severe. My aunt Jossie used to go to workshops. She can hold conversations. Sweet. My aunt Jossie is very, very sweet, lovable, would not hurt anyone, and you know, and we love her very, very much. So at Fairview Nursing Home, she falls in 2010 and breaks her hip. They called my dad and told my dad she fell. But they said, but we checked her out. She's okay. The next day, towards the evening, if I'm not mistaken, my dad said they calls him, Fairview calls him and says, we may have to take Jossie to the hospital because we think, she's been complaining about her hip. So they take her to the hospital, and yes, she had a broken hip. They didn't take her right away. They took her the next day. So right there was a red flag. I did not know that they didn't take her until the next day, until this year during the pandemic. My dad told me because he saw stuff that during this pandemic that it made him reflect back to what happened when she broke her hip. And he was just telling me, like I said, I did not know that they didn't take her to the hospital until the next day, because had I known, the statutory limitations would not have expired. Let's just say that. But I think my dad didn't want to press the issue because his main concern was Jossie having a resident. And I can relate a little, but that's either here or there. Right now, what my aunt is going through, it piggybacks off of the broken hip. Because that's the start of her downfall. The broken hip was the start of my aunt's downfall at Fairview Nursing Home. Several things has happened that I witnessed at Fairview, like the strong pee smell when I would go there. The the nurses or the CNAs, they would want to feed the residents early and put them in the bed just so that their workload can be easy. Like I'm a hairdresser and I would go and do my aunt's hair just to keep it looking neat because she paid for getting her hair done, but it was never done. So they were collecting money for that. Um, One time I went up there, the chair had so much filth in it from food, and nobody was wiping it down. And it was to the point where I just couldn't take it no more. So I wiped it down with some soap and water, disinfected. So my dad, like I said, he would come up there on a regular basis, like 3 to 4 times a week. He would bring food and he would help feed her and the whole 9 yards. Their relationship was just it's just phenomenal. She looked forward to seeing her brother coming to see her just about every day. Jossie was spoiled. We spoiled her, you know. We really spoiled her and she loved it. COVID hit my aunt, and this was like the first or the second week in April. And I got the call, and I had to tell my dad that she had COVID. And well, they suspect that she had COVID, and they wanted to treat her at the facility instead of at the hospital because they claim that they can do better care on her because she knew everyone there. So she wasn't on a respirator. They gave her oxygen, and they said that they're giving her something for her fever, and you know. And my dad and I, we decided to go ahead and let them keep her at the facility because they insisted. We'll take better care of her at the facility. You know, she knows everyone here. So my dad and I, we agreed, like, okay, well, it is a lot of cases at Chestnut Hill Hospital. So I guess it would be best if she would stay there because they have the doctors and nurses there. So we decided to let her stay there. Uh, so they gave me an update on the daily to find out, let me know what was going on with my aunt. Her fever was doing good at one time, and then it was like up and down, up and down. And I constantly called. I constantly kept a log on what was going on with her. I have some emails that some text messages that I was sending a relative just to give her update on what was going on. And they called me for every little thing, which I really appreciated. One time she had swelling in her fingers, and they said they give her an X-ray to make sure that her fingers wasn't broke, and and that came back normal. And then they said one time she had a red spot on her shoulder, and then they said she had a blister on her pinky. They were letting me know every little thing. And like I said, I appreciate it. And I picked their brains on things that, the possibilities and stuff. So it was times I wanted to see her on the FaceTime. I said, can you please let my aunt hear her brother's voice that will make her feel better, that will make her, because my aunt is a fighter. She really is. She's a fighter. She's been through so much. Um, like 3 months prior before COVID hit, my dad came up there and found her arm caught in the wheelchair. It took him and 3 other people a whole hour trying to get her arm out the wheelchair. My dad found her like that. And, she was trying to tell him her arm was caught. And, we literally watched my aunt speech like wither away. I couldn't understand why her speech was getting worse. I really couldn't. And then there was times when her speech was okay. It was like a back and forth thing, back and forth, like. And my dad used to say, Jossie, talk. I can't understand you. Talk. Let me hear what you're saying. So Jossie like I said, she had the virus and they were letting us know everything. And it got to the point where, you know, they finally told us about what I never wanted to hear, a bed sore. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So they said, but it was little. They're going to put her on the wound care list. She did overcome COVID on May the 26th. And on the 28th, they put her in back in isolation because the COVID, I guess, came back. So it was a false negative. Um, I spoke to the wound care doctor for the facility, and he said that that was his first time seeing Jossie since September. I physically spoken to with him, and I think he had treated that little wound on her tailbone, on her sacrum, on her sacrum. They gave her a chest X-ray to make sure she didn't have any pneumonia, the whole everything. Okay, so the social worker Steve, the social worker who didn't like me because I guess I was asking too many questions, and I guess I intimidated him. That's always the case with me with certain people. I don't know. I don't At this point I don't even care, but um Steve would call my dad knowing that my dad wasn't able to answer the phone, that we changed it for them to call me. And we had another person um, for in case of emergency, and that was my dad's friend Mary. She was the third on the list. But for some strange reason, Steve and Mary, they communicated on a daily basis because Mary didn't like me. um, Steve and Mary, they were like best friends. And I eventually had reached out to the health board because I wasn't feeling what was going on with my aunt. I had some like bad feelings on what was going on with her. So I had put in a complaint to the health board, and they did email me back. I have all that in my email stuff. They said that they would do some investigating. Okay, so my aunt Jossie, they said she was doing better. I guess the COVID had went away, and they were saying that she's a fighter, she's a fighter. And then one day we get the call, and they suggest that we put her on hospice. And I'm like, well, how is she on hospice all of a sudden? And you said that she's a fighter, and what changed? And me and my dad, we were like confused. And Steve, the social worker, was saying that he wasn't happy at what he was seeing, and she's losing a lot of muscle mass. And I had spoken to the director of nursing, which was Ron Gallagher. He was the director of nursing at Fairview, and he said that he would give her insure. And you know we spoke to him, and he asked me, was there anything else that we wanted? And I said yes, to give her insure like 3 times a day after every meal. you know so Ron insisted that he would do that. And I couldn't understand why they wanted her on hospice all of a sudden. uh I just couldn't understand why they wanted her on hospice. And then they asked, you know with a hospice person, they said, well, hospice is not like it's end of life. It is end of life, but it's just giving it's giving her more hands on. So I explained that to my dad, and we agreed. So the lady met us at my dad's house, and my dad signed the paper. And then I asked, can she have a air mattress, and they said that they would give her an air mattress, which they did the same day. And the assessment nurse went out there to assess my aunt from hospice. Mind you, they encouraged us to use their hospice facility because they said they have a contract with this particular hospice facility. And again, we went on and used them. So the lady who assessed my aunt, she called me and was like, she told me her name, and she told me that she just finished assessing my aunt. And I asked her how was she, and then I asked her how was that one sore on her sacrum. And she said, well, I'm not concerned about that one. The ones that I'm concerned about is the ones on her legs. And I was a little confused because we weren't aware of any other bed sores other than the one that she told us about. And I asked the lady, how many bed sores does she have? And she said about 7 or 8. I nearly flipped. Like, oh my God. Is it any way you can send me a picture of those sores? And she says she'll see, but she didn't send them. I guess because of the HIPAA law, and I understand. And now that, you know, we see that how everything went on, I understood why they did not want my aunt to go to Chestnut Hill Hospital, because if she had went to Chestnut Hill Hospital and the hospital would have saw them bed sores on her, they would have said no, she came over here like that. So I think they kept her from the hospital to hide those horrible bed sores. I mean, these bed sores were so big they looked like a size 12-foot person on both legs, and her heels had nasty wounds on it. It was as if they never turned her. The wounds were awful. I have everything in my phone. I have a movie in my phone. I've never seen any bed sores like that before. And how we end up getting into the nursing home, let me back it up. I got a call from the CNA saying that my aunt, the red spot, they said she had a DVT on her shoulder. And I said, oh, that must have been that red spot that you told me about 5, 6 weeks ago. So basically, I think they had to disclose the red spot because they had to let us know about the Doppler, because they noticed that someone made the call and told me about the red spot. So they had to say that it was a DVT. And what I couldn't understand was the primary care physician, Dr. Harry D. Butts, that practices uh, at Chestnut Hill, excuse me, that practices at Chestnut Hill Hospital. And he also was the doctor that played with my aunt Sewers at the facility. Um, I couldn't understand why he couldn't see that blood clot on her shoulder. But again, looking at everything that my aunt went through, they probably wanted to hurry up and put her under like the rest of the people that died at Fairview Nursing Home. But it wasn't my aunt's time. It wasn't her time. we got a call from Steve, the social worker, and he stated to Mary, mind he should have called me, but he called Mary, that my dad needs to get up and see his sister because they don't think she's going to make it through the weekend. So I called Steve and he didn't answer, and I told him that I need to be on that list because Steve told Mary only one person can come up and see her. So I told Steve that she's not, my dad is not going up there by himself to see her. My dad just turned 80 again on October the 12th. And this that I'm talking, the bed sores, was in June that we went up there to see my aunt at end of life. Steve put me on the list. I told him I'm coming up there. My dad is a senior citizen and he is not going up there by himself to see his sister in that condition. So I was there with my dad, and when we went into they called me prior before coming up there and asked, "What funeral parlor do you want us to send your aunt to when she expires?" I couldn't believe what was going on, and when we went up there, my aunt didn't have COVID. She passed the COVID. She's in a regular room. And my dad and I, we're all strapped up with our masks, he had his mask, his glasses, his hat. I had my mask, and we had a white gown on to see my aunt. And when we went in that room, the first thing I did was I pulled the covers back because I know she always had to go to the bathroom, and they never change her or take her to the bathroom when she wants to go. And that was the first picture I took. And her pamper looked like it was wet over and over and over again. And all I kept thinking of was the burning on her sacrum, the tailbone, and that pamper just sitting up there. And she was happy to see us, but she was trying to tell us what they were doing, and she couldn't talk. It was like they crippled her with something and she couldn't talk. And I told them, I said, my aunt needs to be changed. And they said, we're going to change her when we finish passing out the trays. So my dad fed my aunt with a wet pamper on. And then the wound care nurse comes in. So after my dad finished feeding my aunt, the CNA said we had to leave the room so they can change her, which we did. And the wound care nurse, when she came, she said we could stay in the room if we want to, but if not, she said, because I warn you, these wounds are very nasty. So I said, no, I can stay in the room. I can handle it. My dad was on the other side of the room and he didn't look at that. I'm glad he didn't because it would have killed him. So I'm helping her with these wounds, and I've never seen no wounds like that before. The wounds was horrible. It was horrible. I don't know how my aunt survived that. Well, I do know the grace of God is the reason why she survived that. Because God was watching out for her. I helped the nurse with the wounds, and she kind of like showed me 2 days before that my aunt was contracted, and she showed me on the phone. She flipped the phone, and I'm like, oh my God, how long has she been like that? And she said, well, I don't know because I don't have her chart in front of me. And this is like my second day changing her wounds. She had wounds on her feet that was this big on the heels, on both feet. She had wounds that was the size of a 12-foot person on both legs. Her ankle was missing. Her ankle bone was missing, but you can see the white inside her ankle that was straight to the bone. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And my aunt, she was like, just seeing she wanted to pamper off. I mean, I got so many videos. I've never seen anything like this before in my life. And when my dad was feeding her, she was eating like she never ate before. You got to see these videos. They are horrible. And the only thing I could think of was they were starving her. They were giving her morphine and they were trying to hurry up and put her under. But my aunt was trying to let us know that she's not ready to go. Please help me. I've never seen anything like that before in my life. My dad was so distraught. He was feeding her. I went and got her 2 Ensures. Mind you, the director of nursing quit on June the 5th. He quit. Ron Gallagher quit June the 5th. And my dad gave her 2 Ensures, her paraded food, some Jello, and she ate it all. My aunt never not want food. She had a good appetite, and she still has. But everything that was going on with my aunt, they always said it was because of COVID. It was because of COVID. It was because of COVID. So I couldn't believe what we saw. It was like a horror movie. I mean, literally a horror movie. So my dad said, I'm coming back up here tomorrow. And I told him I would meet him up there. And I met my dad up there. When I saw what all my dad had given my aunt, he had given her her food that they was feeding her, that were going to give her. He had given her 2 Ensures, a Jello. He gave her so much stuff. When I saw all the stuff he gave her on the side of the tray, I looked, and my aunt was just taking it all, taking it all, taking it all, because she knew that if my dad left, she wasn't going to get no more food. So it was like she was just taking it because she knew that this probably would be the most she eat. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm like, I'm hitting on him. I'm like, Dad, I just got to go to the hospital. And he looking like, I said, she got to go to the hospital. In fact, when she got finished eating, when my dad got finished feeding her, she said, thank you, Marshall. And I'm like, he said, did you hear what she said? She said, thank you, Marshall. And I knew it was time for me to step in. I knew that I could not allow what was going on to continue without me stepping in. And I went in the hallway. I said, we taking my aunt to the hospital. And they said, can I ask you why? The CNA sitting on the side. Can I ask you why? I said, dehydration and malnourishment. I didn't even mention the source. I didn't even mention the source. They said, well, can I tell you that if we had given her fluids it would have made her get pneumonia and it would have taken her out a little faster. I mean, they said it with like a nonchalant attitude. And I said, what do we have to do to take my aunt to the hospital? And if she leaves, can she come back? If that was the case. Because I just needed to know what we could and could not do. And my dad, he was just quiet and he just let me take charge. And they said we just got to call the hospice person. I think her name was Barbara Ross. Barbara and we butt heads because she claims that her assessment nurse made a mistake that my aunt didn't have 7 or 8 sores. She only had 2. But the day we went to see my aunt, we saw 7 or 8. So I'm finding the hospice liable for lying because she sat there and said she had 2 sores and she had 7 or 8. And that's the owner of that hospice facility. Now I know they all work together. So they said we could take my aunt to the hospital. The only thing is we would have to sign her off of hospice because she couldn't be on end of life and getting care at the hospital. So we met the on-call hospice nurse at the hospital and we signed her off of hospice. So I asked them before we took her out because the ambulance came to take my aunt to the hospital. I said, who would be responsible for the ambulatory bill? They said, well, if she comes back, then y'all will have to pay. But if she stays, then we take care of it. So I put the lady on speaker from the hospice facility, and she did say that we can take her to the hospital because it was our right. So we called the ambulance. They came. They took my aunt to Chestnut Hill Hospital. We followed them to the hospital. We could not stay in there, but when I went in there, I gave the guy a glimpse of my phone and I showed him them nasty sores and stuff. And he said, oh, yeah, yeah, with them sores, they going to keep her. So we did sign her off of hospice. And after she was in the hospital, I gave the guy my phone number. I said, can you please call me before she gets discharged? And I told my dad, I said, go home, Dad, get some rest. I'll handle everything. Just get some rest. So he goes home. As soon as I get in the house and I put my feet up, I grab the phone and I call to check up on the status of my Aunt Jossie. And they said she was discharged. I'm like, she what? Who did that? And I was so upset. And they said, well, you're going to have to call tomorrow and take it up with the manager of, I forget what his position was. And my dad, he told me, he said, they discharged. She wasn't even in the hospital for a whole hour and something, a good hour. She was back at the facility. It was almost as if they made the call to Dr. D. Butts, her practicing primary physician, and they must have said, we have your patient, Jossie T. Odie here. And they must have said, he must have said, send her back. That's my patient. Take her back to the facility. She was back at the hospital. I mean, she was back at the facility within an hour. Within an hour. Like, clearly you could see that she was all bandaged up. They never even checked the wounds. They talk about, well, we did her blood work and it was just a little off. And I said, well, you think my dad then gave her 2 Ensures, some water, some juice, the food. That could have triggered the blood work, but she was 100 pounds. They could have seen that she was dehydrated, malnourished, bed sores. The neglect was written all over my aunt, and they sent her back. I was so upset. So I was told to call the next day and take it up with the manager or the supervisor, which I did. And I told him they never did nothing that I asked them to do. So he said, well, who's her practicing doctor? And I didn't know, but I guess with the electronic health medical records, he told me who it was. And he said, the only thing I could tell you to do is to bring her back up there. So in the meantime, Fairview calling me because they want to hurry up and put her back on hospice. They was blowing my phone up. I said, no, we're not putting her back on hospice. If we put her back on hospice, that's pretty much us saying that we are agreeing what y'all are trying to do. And I'm not. So she did not go back on hospice. I said, she's going back to the hospital. So I said, call the ambulance and take her back to the hospital, which they did. So they took her back to Chestnut Hill. This time they kept her. They gave her an IV, which they should have did in the first place. They gave her nutrients in through the IV, and they took pictures of her wounds, which they should have did in the first place. And then the intern, he calls and he's speaking to me directly, and he's saying that more than likely she's gonna have to stay because the wounds have to be debrided. And I said, thank you, Jesus. So they kept her. And she was in there for 4 days, if I'm not mistaken. 4 or 5 days. So within that 4 or 5 days, I'm with trying to get in touch with the case manager because my dad has guardianship on my aunt, which is his sister, but I'm helping him because I have to take over. And Dina was the case manager at Chestnut Hill Hospital. She was giving me a hard way to go. And all I was trying to ask her was, what is the procedure to transfer her out of that facility to a new facility? Nadina and Dr. Harry D. Butts, they must have worked together. I don't know. I guess they all linked in together. And Harry goes and calls me and tells me, like, well, I understand you want to change physicians, which I did say I wanted to change physicians. And then he said, I got a question to ask you. When she's discharged from the hospital from getting her wounds debrided, whose house is she going to go over? Is she going over your house or is she going over your father's house? Then they said the same thing to my father, trying to scare him and intimidate him, knowing that her residence, even if she's not transferred, is at Fairview Nursing Home. So I couldn't understand why he said, whose house is she going over? Like, in that condition that she was in, that was an insult. That was a racist insult. And I just was so upset. But Dana didn't help me. And I felt like she should have helped me get my aunt transferred to another facility straight from the hospital, but she didn't. So when my aunt came from of Chestnut Hill Hospital, she went to back to the facility. She went back to the facility for 3 weeks, and the whole 2 to 3 weeks I've been on Steve case, like she wants to get transferred. We want her to get transferred. He was being defiant with me, and he was like, you're not the guardian. And I mean, I have never in my life dealt with anything like this before. It was like I was trying to save a life and they were trying to kill her. It was unbelievable. It was like my aunt's life did not matter. It was like they took advantage of her disability because my aunt couldn't talk, but we knew what she was saying in the video. When we went up there to see her, she pretty much was saying she wanted to go home. She wanted to go home. I got so many videos. When you see this video, it's just crazy. So they were saying once she got her wounds debrided, how it was critical how who's ever going to take care of her at the facility, they have to make sure they feed her. They have to, because she lost a lot of muscle mass, and these wounds have to really be. She got to get the right vitamins, nutrients, and stuff like that. But for 3 weeks, when she went back to Fairview Nursing Home, they pretty much was still giving her morphine, and she was not on hospice. They were still feeding her a little bit of food, a little bit of water. It was as if she was on hospice. And I called there. When I would call, they would leave me hanging on the phone to the point where I would just have to hang up. And it was horrible. I would just call to see how she was doing, and they wouldn't put me on the phone. And I've never seen anything like that before in my life. So finally, my mom, she had sent a couple of nursing home care places over, and Ambler is the one we wanted, but they only had one bed, and then Drescher was their sister facility. So Steve finally told my dad, because he was giving me a hard way to go, and I was at my dad's house, and I said, Steve, this is Cassandra, and I'm here with my dad. Say hi, Dad. He said hi. And I said, and we want her transferred ASAP. And I didn't know that it was just that simple. I was trying to ask Dana, the case manager, how simple was it for it to be transferred, for her to be transferred. And it only would have taken a day. They fought and gave me hell trying to transfer my aunt to a new facility. So for 3 weeks, she went back to the same place that tried to kill her. And then he decides to call my dad and tell my dad that he sent the transfer in to Drescher and Ambler. And he told my dad, I hope you're happy, and I don't ever want to hear your daughter's name, Cassandra, again. And I said, did he say that? Oh my God, did he say that? So, but prior before that, he wanted to put her, well, let me back up. Within the 3 weeks, they wanted to try to put her back on hospice. And we met the people at my dad's house. We met the one person at my dad's house. And I mean, they were really trying. And when I met at my dad's house, the lady who was trying to sign her back on hospice, I got there just in time, and I asked her, I said, what is palliative care? And she told us what palliative care was, and my dad said, yeah, that's what we want. So she never left with a signature for hospice. And the minute she walked off, she called, and I heard her say, they didn't sign the paper, you know. And I think they was just so upset because they knew they were in trouble. See, I had already called the Montgomery County Association of the Aging, and I also called the health people. So I done stirred the pot. So my name was smeared all up in there, and they was not trying to make things easy for me. And Steve was saying, in order for you to get her on palliative care, your father, he was saying, in order for your father to get her on palliative care, now mind you, Steve is the social worker, they would have to assess her to see if she's a candidate for palliative care. So I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'll go up there to get the paper, but you will not sign that paper, because if you sign a paper to see if they can see if she's a candidate for palliative care, they're going to use their people, and their people, they're going to say, no, she's not a candidate. She has to go back on hospice. So we never signed the paper. And I said, when she gets into the new facility, if they want her to get on, and it wasn't even palliative care what we wanted aggressive care. If she wanted to get on aggressive care, then the new facility will go ahead and do it. So she didn't get an Ambler, she gets into Drescher. Calls over to Drescher because Steve told me that the transfers went in both. I called over to Drescher, and the director of admission said, hi, yes, this is, I forget her name. She said, I have the paper for your aunt, and yes, it came over. And then she said, and And Ron told me to tell you hi. And I'm like, Ron, why that name sound familiar? And then I'm like, oh my God, Ron was the director of nursing from Fairview Nursing Home. He quit and now he's at Drescher. So he sees everything that my aunt went through, but now he's directing the same stuff that he directed at Fairview. He's at Drescher. So I told my lawyer, Lynn Haberman, because I still have this lawyer, Lynn, who had picked up my case, who said that they're not looking for no money until after the case is settled. So I told Lynn, I said, it's a conflict of interest. I got emails of when he first picked my case up and everything. And then they said, yes, you're right. This is his paralegal person said that is a conflict of interest. So I spoke to Judy, the social worker for Drescher, and Judy knew to call me if they needed anything. She sent me the care package for how they were going to treat my aunt, and they did aggressive care on her. She got occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy. And each time we saw my aunt on the activity, I I videotaped it with my with my Apple, with my iPhone, but I don't have the sound. So the first time we saw her, she looked good. She was talking. She was like, I thank God and I prayed and I prayed. And I got all of the videos. I got everything to make this case. I have everything in this thing. And I said, Aunt Jassy, and God heard your prayers. God hears your prayers. And she had the speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy, and Medicare, Medicaid paid for that. In fact, I had already had reached out to Medicare, Medicaid, and I did a a complaint on what happened at Fairview because I know when they get the bill, they're going to say, well, how was she on hospice and now she's in the hospital getting wounds debrided? So I did let them know what had happened. I let Medicare, Medicaid know what had happened. So my aunt's at Drescher now, and I'm assuming that Ron quit because they weren't doing what they were supposed to at Fairview. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt, still knowing that it was a conflict of interest. They never gave us any admission papers. That they immediately took her in and they did the occupational speech and physical therapy until all of the sessions ran out and Medicare, Medicaid wasn't paying anymore. So I get a call from the the occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy. They all on the phone, and they asked me, did I deny any more services? And I said, no, not that I know of. I can't sign no papers. Then they said, well, do you know if your dad denied? I said, I don't think so because he would have talked to me about it. And they wanted to know if I can call him, which I did. So I called my dad and I told him to call them right away. So he called and he told them why he denied it. He said, I denied it because Medicare, Medicaid is not paying anymore. She maxed out, you know, her benefits for that. And I don't want y'all billing my house. So I don't know if they was upset, but that came on August the 26th because if my dad had not called that day, they would have been continuing the services and then billing him so he could pay for it. So that they would have had end up leaning his house. So August the 26th, that has stopped. Like I said, I don't know if they was upset, but on September the 3rd, I get a call and it was from Abington Hospital because that's the hospital that Drescher uses. So she didn't have the same doctor. She had a new doctor and, you know, she's at Abington now. So I get a call and they're saying that they have my aunt Joshlyn Odie and they need verbal consent. So I'm thinking she's getting a physical at Abington Hospital. So I said, I'll give you my verbal consent. And I said, I was confused. I said, wait a minute. She at the hospital? And they said, yes. I said, well, why is she at the hospital? And they said, Drescher brought her in on the 1st. Now, this is the 3rd of September. We had no idea she was in the hospital. And they said, Drescher brought her in on the 1st because they said she fell out of bed trying to go to the bathroom. Now, mind you, my aunt has not walked. Her hips are contracted. And she got a metal plate in her hip from 2010. She had wounds debrided. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. So they said Ron called the day before yesterday and today. Ron never called us to tell us she was in the hospital. So now I'm trying to think, how am I going to tell my dad this? Because he at work. And he's already going through a lot because my dad wasn't eating. I would go up there to his house because he lives by himself. I would I would bring him food. He takes a lot of medicines. He lost so much weight. I said, Dad, you gotta eat. You gotta eat because you gotta be strong for Jossie and you gotta be strong for me. I'm in this all by myself. I have 6 brothers and sisters, and they don't like me because I love doing what I do. And they don't come to visit my dad. I'm doing all this on my own. Me and my dad, we going through this thing with my Aunt Jossie. And I'm literally watching my dad deteriorate, and I'm trying to be strong. So I couldn't believe Ron and them did not call to tell that she was in the hospital. So I asked what was the matter with her. They told me that she got 2 broken ribs. They said that they did a CT scan on her head, no concussion. She got a deformity on her side. I guess it was contracted from the broken hip. And I asked them how was the bed sores. And they said, well, the sores look to be doing good. They're 1 centimeter in diameter. They're going to give some dressing cream to take back to the facility. And I'm like, I can't believe they never called to tell us that she was in the hospital. 2 whole days. So I asked, can we come up there and see her? And they said only one person, but I did call my dad. I called him at work and I said, I just want you to know everything is fine. I said, Aunt Jossie in the hospital though, but she's all right. But they said she fell. And my dad said, nobody didn't call me. I said, don't feel bad, Dad. They didn't call me either. So I said, can you get off of work early? Because mind you, we hadn't seen her since she had her wounds debrided. Because nobody can go in the nursing home. He said, we can go up there around 6. I said, Dad, she been in there for 2 days and they may release her. We need to go right away. I'll see if she's not going to be released, then we can go up there at 6. As soon as I hung up the phone, they called and said she'll be released today. Now, mind you, Abington should have transferred to another facility. They did the same thing that Chestnut Hill did. This is neglect. Why would you put a person back in harm's way? So I went up there to see my aunt. I videotaped. I asked my aunt, I said, Aunt Jossie, now mind you, the Dr. D. Butts from Chestnut Hill gonna say my aunt had dementia. My aunt don't have dementia. She don't have dementia. So while I'm at Abington from this other situation, I asked my aunt, I said, Aunt Jossie, how did you fall? Did they drop you? She shook her head and was like, yes. She shook her head and she looked like she was in so much pain. And I felt so bad for her. Her legs was contracted, like literally, like the crease was so tight. And I'm like, common sense would know that she has no movement down there. She's less than 100 pounds, or she was probably a little bit heavier because she was eating and she wasn't on end of life. And they gave her occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy. So Fairview said she was at end of life, and they were under Ron's direction, but yet Ron quit, and now he goes to Drescher. So the end of life was not end of life at Fairview, obviously, because Drescher picked her up, and they're giving her aggressive care, and she was doing good. And then it's like retaliation when no money. It was like retaliation once the money stopped, and I don't understand what happened. So I'm asking my aunt questions. I'm asking her everything I need to know. I said, Aunt Jossie, look at me. What is your brother's name? She said, my brother's name is Marshall. So I'm trying to prove that my aunt did not have no dementia. And then I asked her, I said, look at me, Aunt Jossie. Look at me. Is she looking in pain? I said, when you was at the old nursing home, remember the old nursing home, Jossie? She was like, she shook her head, yes. I said, when your brother was coming up there to see you, did you have them sores on your legs? And she said, yeah. What I believe they were doing was they was giving her psychotropic medicine to make sure she wouldn't talk so that she couldn't tell her brother about her bed sores on her legs because the wound care doctor said he saw her back in September and now he's here doing one wound on her circum. You know what I mean? Her sacrum. But what about the other wounds? The wound care doctor should have been there way before. So who was playing with the wounds on her legs? I'm supposing it was Dr. D. Butts. He played with the wounds on her legs to the point where he couldn't fix them no more. Instead of him saying, I'm going to go ahead and take her over to Chestnut Hill Hospital because these wounds needed to be debrided, he didn't. So there comes a time when you know you're supposed to do the right thing, and he did not. He took advantage of my aunt because she had a disability, and he knew that she couldn't talk for herself. And the other people did the same thing. And now she's over at a new facility, and they same practice followed the old facility. And Ron didn't call because he knew he was wrong. So they never called. So we pretended we ain't know nothing. We pretended we ain't know nothing. So we gonna act like we don't know nothing. We not gonna call. We gonna just act like we don't know nothing. So since we've been seeing her every Saturday on activity, I told my dad I wonder how they gonna try to pretend this one out. So activity came on Saturday. My aunt, the lady calls for FaceTime. And then I said, why is she in the bed and why is she not in the wheelchair? She said, oh, this the lady, the activity lady. She said, oh, whenever a resident goes to the hospital, we quarantine them for two weeks. I said, she went to the hospital? Why was she at the hospital? Oh, I don't know. You're going to have to talk to them. I'm just activity. So in the meantime, and mind you, when I was in the hospital with Jossie, I'm looking at her legs. Her legs look horrible. They look like balloons. And I'm asking her all kinds of questions and she answering. And I got everything on my phone. I got the whole evidence in my phone. And I couldn't understand why they were rushing her out the hospital. They said because they needed the bed. I guess they need to put somebody else in there so they can make money. And, but when activity came that Saturday, the lady claimed that my aunt wasn't in any pain. They say she wasn't in any pain. So my aunt, she just she just in pain, and she knew we were there, and I'm like, Aunt Jossie, we love you, we got your back, we love you, we got your back. And oh God, this is crazy. That night, my dad gets a call from Drescher, and they're pretty much telling my dad that they gotta take Jossie back to the hospital. And my dad was like, well, I never knew she was in the hospital in the first place. What's going on? They said, we don't know, but it don't look good. It don't look good. And, she gonna need surgery. She gonna need surgery. So my dad was like, well, what is going on? Like, so after he hangs up with them, he calls me and say, did you get the call? I said, no. Well, what's the matter, Dad? He said, they got to take Jossie back to the hospital. I said, for what? They was like, they said it don't look good, and, you know, they going to need to do surgery. And I'm like, oh my God, Dad, what is the matter? So as soon as I hung up with them, the orthopedic called, and they was like, this is Dr. I wrote his name down. He said, I don't know if this is a new incident or if this is something we missed. And I'm like, well, what's going on? It was like, well, we have your aunt here and she has a broken femur. And I'm like, a broken femur? I said, well, I could tell you it's something that you missed, because when I was up there, her legs looked like balloons. And I saw that with my eyes. I got it in the phone. And I also, when I had went up there, I asked my aunt to try to stretch out her legs. And in my video, you could see that her legs was hurting. It was like she was like, and I didn't even touch it. So she's sitting in the hospital for 2 days, and Abington Hospital never x-rayed her bottom on down because they felt like, oh, well, ain't nothing going on down there. But my aunt was in pain when she was in that bed for 2 whole days at Abington. She had a broken femur, and from the orthopedic, they said that the break was so big that they would have to put a metal plate from her knee all the way up to her hip on the same side where the metal plate is from her broken hip that she had broken prior. And they would recommend us not doing that because it would make her be in so much pain. And I just felt so bad for my aunt. My aunt's been going through so much, and it's been taking a toll on my dad. And we're in this by ourselves to the point where we don't even want to tell any more of the family members what else is going on since then. Like, one of them that we was talking to, she knew about the prior stuff, but she don't know about the broken hip, the broken femur, the whole everything. So the lawyer who I'm dealing with, I was dealing with, I thought that he was a good lawyer, but I had told him, I said, look, I need you to go to that nursing home and I need you to pull them tapes so we can see what actually happened to my aunt. And I don't know if he said he was going to do it. We never even really had an interview with him until like just like about a month, a little over a month ago. We had him since July, and he's just given us an interview. And then he rushed us off the phone, talk about, well, Zoom is only giving us 40 minutes. But I told him I want a trial. I don't want a settlement, because a settlement is basically saying that no one is at fault. Here's some hush money, shut up, don't make this public, and going about your business. That's not what I want. I need nursing home reform. I need legislation change. And I need the disabled people to be protected because they can't speak for themselves. And I know Governor Wolf, he passed a law He passed a law for anyone who had a loved one in a nursing home and died from COVID that they cannot sue because the doctors and the nurses went beyond their scope of expertise unless you could prove negligence. But what about the ones who couldn't prove negligence and they were negligent and these people died? But I'm my aunt's voice, and I'm going to speak up for my aunt, and I'm going to speak up for those whose relatives didn't see what they were doing. So when I went to, me and my dad went up there to Abington Hospital to see her the next day. He was feeding her, and I never seen my dad look like that before. I said, "Dad, you all right?" And he was just in another world. I felt so bad. I gotta be strong for him. I gotta be strong for Jossie. I couldn't believe what we saw. My aunt was in so much pain, but yet she's still strong. But she's in bad shape. And then they promised that they wouldn't discharge her over Memorial's Day weekend, Labor Day weekend. Well, you don't have to worry about it. We don't discharge over the holiday. Well, actually, the next day they're going to call and say, "We're discharging your aunt." And I said, "Wait a minute. I thought we were to talk to the case manager and some doctors." I said, they said that they would not be discharging my aunt over the holiday. And now all of a sudden it's changed. I said, "Look, I need to ask you something. If you had a loved one that came from a nursing home, all broke up, broken femur, broken ribs, would you send them back to that nursing home?" I said, "I demand you change nursing homes before she leave out of this hospital. I demand you do so." And I think they heard my cry. So I helped them get some nursing home facilities. I said I want to try Ambler. So Ambler had one bed open that was getting ready to open, and she was in there. And now she's an Ambler, and they love her. They said she's so sweet. She don't bother nobody. I just wish she had went there before. I'm mad at Ron because if you knew that was a conflict of interest, you should have said, "I'm going to go ahead and transfer her to our sister facility because this is a conflict of interest." Had you did that, she would not have no broken ribs, no broken femur, and she would have been in a better situation. And then they're going to try to see, like, they're going to try to say that we didn't fill out the admission papers. They never gave us no admission papers. And when I came up to Drescher to get their stuff, they're going to try to bring me some admission papers. Talk about, "Can you get these to your father if you see him? Because we mailed them out 3 times certified and he never returned them." My dad never, ever, ever got any certified papers. And if he did, where's your receipts? I said, "I don't feel comfortable taking these papers. I'd rather you send them out the way that you said you send them out so he can get them," which they did. And then I told the lawyer that we got these papers and we don't know what to do. He said, "Well, email them to us and let me look over them, but do fill them out." Like, and I'm like, "What?" So anyway, we never filled them out. Amber talking about, "Well, that's how we get paid. We need to get paid." And I'm like, "Oh my God, my aunt all broke up and all they worry about is how they gonna get paid." Now, I believe that this is discrimination on the disabled. My aunt is a human being. She don't deserve. She suffered long. I don't want no settlement. I want this to go to trial. And I know I can't have this public right now, but I'm reaching out to you, Reverend Al Sharpton. I need you to give me the best lawyers because right now I have Fairview Nursing Home, the hospice facility, the doctor, Chestnut Hill, Abington. But wait a minute, yeah, Abington, because they didn't diagnose her femur. So Fairview Nursing Home, Drescher, the hospice facility, the doctor, Abington, and Chestnut Hill. I got 6 situations going on, not to mention this other lawyer, Lynn Haberman, because Lynn knew that I did not want a settlement. He strung me and my dad on for 4 months. We signed papers and everything. And all he kept saying was, you don't really want a trial because if you get a trial, then it's going to take long. Then he going to say um I can have you money in about 6 months. And I told him, I said, it's not about the money. It's not about the money. Justice needs to be served. My aunt went through a lot. And he claims that you want a trial, but that's not going to happen. And he talked really nasty towards me. Then he going to say something besides, if you go for a trial, that's going to be a mark on the nursing home's record. And I'm saying to myself, whose side are you on? And then he going to say something, and you're not going to sue Abington because if you sue Abington, you're going to lose. And I'm just listening to him. And then the crazy thing is, I told him, I said, I'm willing to take the chance. I have everything in my phone that could make this case. I said, let the jurors decide. So I wasn't liking what he was saying. I wasn't liking what he was saying. And I wrote him a 4-page letter letting him know my background, my dad's background, my daughter's background. In other words, we don't want a quick fix so you can move on to. I felt like he was like a wreck chaser. You know how you have a car accident and they chase wrecks? That's how he had me because I was looking for a lawyer and I had called and he didn't answer the phone, but he called me right back. And from that point on, I haven't been able to get in touch with him, but everything was through his paralegal person. And me and my dad, we asked him, if this case is too big for you, this was before my aunt's broken femur and everything. We said, if this case is too big for you, let us know. He said, oh, no, no, no. So he strung us along. He strung us along when he should have let us go a long time ago because he knew he was a settlement lawyer and he was not a trial lawyer. Instead of him trying to manipulate my mind, which is very hard for me to do, for them to do, he kept us stringing along. So when I wrote him the 4-page letter, my dad said, give him about a week because he wanted to see how he would respond back to the letter. He said, give him about a week. And if he don't respond back, then we'll move on. I reached out to this other black lawyer. I'm not even going to mention his name. I'm not going to do that. I let him know. And I told him, I'd rather to use you. I'd rather keep it with us. And he said, well, you already working with a lawyer. But I liked his profile and I liked what it was saying. And he listened to me. And then I knew that if we had another lawyer, it wouldn't have been nothing to let that lawyer go because the new lawyer would have just had to write and say, I'm taking over. But the guy never called me back. The other guy never called me back. The guy who I wanted to keep it in the family, he never called back. And I felt like, are these big corporations intimidating to you? Like, I'm not chasing after nobody to to get some exposure on what I feel as though is the right thing to do. And I don't want a quick fix because my aunt is human and she hurts like everybody else hurts. She can't help her disability. She can't help her disability. So my dad said, give him until Wednesday. So when Tuesday came, I'm studying for my brokers. So I signed on at 9 o'clock in the morning, and 9:05, I get a call from my dad's play daughter at his job. And she said, Cassandra, something's the matter with your dad. He's not responding. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? What's going on? And they was like, he's not responding. We got to take him to the ambulance, to the hospital. I said, well, what hospital was close to you? And she said, uh, Abington And she said another one. I said, take him to Abington. So I gets in the car. I tells my teacher that I'm not able to get on to do my session, that my dad, something's the matter with my dad. So I gets in the car and I meet my dad over at Abington, and my dad had a brain stroke. He had a brain stroke. And they had to do this surgery that I had to be the person to make the decision. And I prayed on it and I asked God, I said, God, please bring my dad through this, please. My dad wasn't taking his medicine. He put me as power of attorney on his medical thing at the hospital. And I couldn't go in the hospital. I could go in the hospital, but I couldn't go upstairs where the surgery was. So I went into the cafeteria and I met with a client who I used to do her hair, and she worked there, and we ate, and I was distraught, and I'm like, oh my God. So she had to go back to work. And the minute she went back to work, I get a call from Senator at Art Haywood office, and I had reached out to them and some time ago, and God intervened because I prayed. I said a prayer. I posted a prayer on Facebook, and then I put it so only I can see it. So I left it there. I let go and I let God. And as soon as I did that, I got a phone call from the senator's office, and I was on the phone with them for a whole hour. And the minute I hung up with them, because the surgery was a 2 hour surgery, the surgeon called downstairs and said, your dad's surgery was a success. You can come up to the IC room and you can come see him. And I went up there and I seen my dad, and we've been going through so much. And my aunt is still hanging in there, and I need me a lawyer because the lawyer who we was going to have Lynn, he dropped us when I should have dropped him. And he gonna tell my dad because I told Mr. Lynn that my dad had a brain stroke, and I don't know to what extent. I think he thought that my dad didn't know nothing, but Lynn got really nasty with me and going to say something, because I had wrote to him, and I said, I haven't heard anything from you from that letter that I had responded. Could you please what's going on? Let me know what's going on. So then he calls. I sent it to the paralegal person. So he finally calls and said, well, I didn't know every move I make, I have to call and let you know what I'm doing. He got really nasty with me. And he was like, well, you're not the guardian and your father's the guardian. Because I told him my dad had a stroke. So I guess he felt like, oh, he's done, he was like, well, your father's the guardian. You're not even the guardian. And he was like, you're not going to, he was like, well, we're not going to trial. If you feel as though that, you want a trial, then maybe I'm not for you. You knew I wanted to trial when you first picked me, because when we first picked you, because I told you I wanted to trial. I told you, I said I wanted to eventually write this in a book. He talked about, you want a book and you want this and you want that. And he got really nasty with me. He said, let's face it, your aunt was in bad shape when she went in there, and she can't be in no more pain than she was when she went in there when she got out of there. And I was done. And when he told me that I wasn't even a guardian, I went upstairs. I said, Dad, this is the lawyer on the phone. And he told me that Aunt Jossie was in bad shape when she went in there, and she was in no more pain from when she went in there than she was when she went out. And I told him, I said, my aunt bleed like you bleed. She is no dog. She is a human. I never said she was. And I said, Dad, do you want to continue with him, or do you want us to, because he talking about, I can have you money in 6 months and all this stuff. And I said, Dad, let's let him go. And he said, okay, we're gonna let him go, but I am trying to find a lawyer who is willing to take a trial, who's willing to stand up and do this case for me. I don't want no settlement. Who I'm tired of these lawyers who just want to just do a quick settlement so they can move on to their next client. This is not what I want. My aunt is suffering, and I'm trying to hurry up and get her case started before she expires because now they saying she's losing 3 pounds a week, and she came in at 119 pounds, and they can't understand why she's losing 2 to 3 pounds. She's eating all her meals, and they can't even really move her so that we can go in and see her because they would have had to put her in a wheelchair. But because of the broken femur, they got to keep her straight because the femur still hurts her. So we are really like, I need some help. Please, can you just reach out and help us? Please, we need Al Sharpton. This is discrimination on the disabled. And you know, as far as Appleton is concerned, I appreciate them saving my dad's life, but my dad and Jossie are two different people. And I believe they were negligent by not taking an x-ray to finding out that she had a broken femur because when they took her back to the nursing home, all the nursing home knew was we got to be careful for these ribs because she got 2 fractured ribs. But they had no idea that she had a broken femur. But if they'd have saw how big her leg was, and it scared them because they were rocking her on her femur when they were changing her and noticed that she was screaming and crying because she bleed like they bleed. And then that's what scared them. And that's why they had to rush her back to the hospital. So I believe Edmonton is negligent for that. My dad, I can't lose my dad right now. He is suffering because of Jossie. My daughter moved out because I've been really like going through and she couldn't take it. My mom has been helping out with the food for me and my dad. My dad is staying with me right now because he lived by himself. But I believe God had his hands all in this because if my dad was home by himself, he could have died and he would not be here today. And by him still working, it was the reason why he was at work. And we've been trying to get him, I've been trying to get him to stop working for the longest at 80 years old. And right now, he still want to go back to work. He want to go back. He was like, I said, Dad, you can't go back right now. You still got to get your follow up. But I pray that this video gets in the right hands and they reach out to me so I can get this thing started. Because what my aunt is going through, I want them to see her in the condition that she's in. And just, they did an interview on her at Ambler and they asked her questions and she gave them the answers that she needed. I need y'all to intervene. I need y'all to help me with this case. This has been going on too long with my aunt. Nobody should be able to suffer the way she's suffering. It has affected me. It's affected my dad. Can you please reach out and talk to me? Please, can you help me? Can you get me a pit bull lawyer? I got all of the work right here. I got everything you need. Please. I'm going to make this a YouTube link and I need you to literally take the time and just reach out to me. Thank you very much. I love you and I hope to hear from you really soon.